Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing really well and welcome back to my podcast, Life of an Artrepreneur. This is going to be episode 3, so I feel like I'm flying through them now. But I'm super excited for this episode because it's going to be quite an in-depth one, I feel like. It might end up being a bit longer than I anticipate, but we'll see how we get on. So for this episode, I'm going to be talking about realistic art versus conceptual art. In the very first episode that I did for this podcast, a lot of you resonated with my whole kind of uni experience where I studied fine art and I found it to be very conceptual and they had no real interest in like realism. And you kind of got a higher mark the more unusual your idea was. People even did like performance art at my uni and I'm sure they got like the highest mark, but I'm just like, I don't know, my mind is blown and I understand that art is so subjective and there's so many different kinds and it just literally depends on what you like and your own opinions and everything like that. But I thought I'll give you my opinion on it and my experience on it and just how I found the whole, being a realistic artist from sort of uni onwards up until now. So I kind of do understand how, to an extent, everything in art has like already been done. So having that different aspect on things and sort of, changing it as much as you can, having a completely different idea or aspect on something that's already been done, or creating something that's completely unique and original can make it a lot more interesting because sometimes you do get sick of seeing the same things. I do realise a lot of wildlife artists, like coloured pencil artists, they do have, similar styles. So I do understand that, but then it's also like, I hate how much realism is kind of looked down on by certain mainstream galleries in particular and like modern galleries in general. It is kind of looked down on as an art style because everyone, probably the question I got most in uni and sometimes still now is like, well, why not just have a picture? Why draw it and make it look so realistic? Why have like a photocopy, if you will? But I always reply with like how I never really just copy the photograph. I kind of use it as a really high quality reference for all the details and everything like that. But quite often I'll combine multiple photos together to create something completely original, especially if I'm working on my own wildlife piece. There's a farm near me called Smith Hills Farm, and you can get really close with like just, farm animals, which is great for me for taking reference photos. It's always full of kids as well because it's kind of like a kiddie place. They've made it more suitable for kids, but you can go and you can get super close with the animals and it's great for me for like the reference photos. So if I take loads of reference photos, I can then, have multiple and kind of lay them out and make my own kind of completely original composition. And then even then I'll be copying from the photograph, but I can enhance colours, I can change different things, I can add things in. I never just copy exactly from the photograph. I always think the reference is there to use as a reference and as a guide, and you can make it as much as your own as you want. And that's also what I do for pet portrait commissions as well, because some people say, can you add a little bit of this or that in? Can you take that out? His colouring or her colouring is a bit more similar to this photo, not this one. So you're always sort of working with multiple images at the same time and making something that captures like the whole like essence and character of that animal. And for me, I just enjoy the whole process of building up layers and creating that texture of like fur that looks like you could just touch it. I just love that whole process. I know it's quite timely and you need a lot of patience, but that's kind of what I enjoy. And it shows, especially with coloured pencils, that's kind of what realism is made for in a way, because colour pencils is all about layering and you can get so much detail. So that's why I think a lot of coloured pencil artists are kind of realism artists as well. They kind of go hand in hand. I think if I was doing more of a collection of work, like wildlife pieces as a collection, then I'd have more of an idea or a concept behind it, just so they'd all link together. Or if I had, a series of artwork that were displayed all together, it would make sense with the idea behind it. I don't always think that the idea or the concept has to be so in-depth and so out there or unusual. It could just be something dead simple that makes sense with your work. I think that's, I always thought in uni you've got to think of the most obscure thing to get a high mark, and I guess you kind of did on that course that I did, which was fine art, because it is very conceptual and they love the context behind the work. But I think, if you just enjoy the process more and you're more of a process-driven artist, there's no real right or wrong as to whether you need some huge idea behind it or not. You might just enjoy the process, and documenting that process is kind of your whole idea or context behind it, if you will. There's an artist who I follow who does realistic pet portraits and wildlife. She does a lot of horses, Georgie Turner, and she is a really good example of how you can be a realistic pet portrait and wildlife artist but have that sort of contemporary spin on it. So she's doing a collection of art currently where she's drawing a series of horses. I think the collection's called Nosy Pony, and it's just like a really obscure perspective or angle of the horse, where the noses are like in the forefront of the picture and everything else is kind of blurred behind it. But I think altogether it'll end up being a really good collection of work, and you've kind of got that different angle of it, because obviously a lot of people just draw, realistic horses and they show all the muscles and the tonal values and make that fur look really shiny. But the fact she's gone sort of the other way with that and really shown that fun kind of clumsy character of the horse is kind of a nice spin to have on it, really. So that's quite a good example, really, kind of bringing in some of that contemporary, like contextual idea, but still coming through with those like super realistic qualities to your work. So yeah, go and have a look at her work. That's Georgie Turner on Instagram. I think as well, in terms of like conceptual art, I learned a lot about all the different art movements throughout history at uni. Didn't find it very interesting at the time, to be honest. I just wanted to draw or paint, and I couldn't really care less. But then now I kind of look back and I think it is actually quite interesting how we've got to here, because you'll often go to a gallery now and you'll see like huge paintings that have like paint splatters on them, or they'll just be like a block colour. And you look at, like, if I'm a process artist, I enjoy the process. I appreciate work that has been, like, you can tell the artist has spent quite a lot of time on it, really perfecting the skills to get something looking like really perfect. If I go into a gallery and see something like that, that's just like a block of colour or a paint splatter on a canvas, I'm just a bit like, what is going on? And it'll be going for like absolutely thousands, and galleries, like contemporary mainstream galleries, just absolutely lap it up because it's probably commercial, and commercial art sells. It can be seen in like a modern home, and when you see loads of modern homely interiors, there's a lot of that kind of art going on. But I think obviously, to back that up, some people do have really good ideas behind it, and it does make sense with their ideas, and I can appreciate some are really quite good like that. I do like some. It's not like I hate all conceptual abstract art, but because I'm a realistic artist and I enjoy the process and I like seeing other people's work like that, that's just my sort of taste and outlook on it. But I can appreciate that kind of work as well. But I think when you see it all the time, it kind of all merges into one. You kind of forget what you've seen, like so many paint splatters and abstract landscapes and everything. And some are executed amazingly well, and they have amazing ideas behind them, don't get me wrong. But I mean, I went to Manchester Art Fair. I've been twice now. I'll probably be going again this year. And it's really interesting to see the kind of work there. So Manchester Art Fair is basically the Manchester version of the other art fair in London, which is basically like local artists and local galleries exhibit work there, and you can just walk around. It's just full of work. People can purchase work if they want to, but it's just good to kind of look around and get some inspiration and see what is going on in your kind of local area. Well, not local area, it's like the whole of like Lancashire, Manchester, everything like that. But just see what kind of galleries are there and what sort of work they're exhibiting. And a lot of them are pretty similar. And in terms of wildlife art and realism, there is a little bit of realism. I'd probably say it's like 75% abstract and the rest is realistic. or has like realistic qualities to it. There are a few galleries who exhibit wildlife artwork, and there's a few wildlife artists who exhibit their own work as well. So that again is just a fraction of the artwork that's there. And because there's so much contemporary stuff, in a way, it kind of makes the wildlife stuff kind of stand out. But I think, it just depends. Art is so subjective. You either love the abstract stuff or you love the realistic stuff. And then again, you either love wildlife or you love landscapes. It just completely depends. It's just all subjective and depends on your own taste and what you kind of want it for, really, in terms of the artwork, whether it's going in your house or you just like it to look at, or whether you like a certain medium. Like it just all depends. It's so subjective. But as I was saying about uni and kind of learning all the different art movements, it's kind of really interesting now that we've got like super contemporary art, but we've never really had a time in the art space or like timeline or whatever you want to call it, where it's been fully focused on realism. So it's kind of interesting. I'd love to see how in a few years, or, once everyone's kind of got over all of the paint splattery sort of things, whether it leans even more into that, or whether people start appreciating realism a little bit more, or whether it'll even gain that popularity again, because there is such a divide with realism. Like I was saying about people just thinking, well, why not just draw a picture? I kind of can see both sides. There's definitely been some competitions that I've applied to over the years that give you that kind of insight into what these competitions or exhibitions and galleries are kind of looking for. And obviously there's so many that you can apply to, but for me, being a pet portrait and wildlife artist, there's kind of a few that I've applied to over the years. So I'll kind of go through them and tell you my experience with them, whether I've got anywhere with them or whether I've been rejected every year, and what they are, in case you want to apply to them yourself. You can definitely kind of see what they like and they don't like. So, for example, Jackson's Art Prize heavily leans towards paintings rather than drawings. This year was the first time I applied to it. I think it was in January I applied for it, maybe a bit later on. I think I put it on my story, and a lot of other kind of pet portrait artists messaged me saying they've had an experience where they've pretty much been, rejected every year, and all the people that get shortlisted are often painters. They definitely lean towards that painting rather than drawing, which is fine. Every competition's completely different. They do select some drawings, otherwise people that draw wouldn't apply. But with Jackson's art, I think it tends to be a bit more abstract rather than realistic. I've applied to the Derwent Drawing Prize, which again was the first time I applied this year. I didn't get shortlisted, but obviously that is more, completely drawing based. So they do really like coloured pencils and graphite and charcoal and that sort of drawing medium. However, I found that the ones that were shortlisted were very much black and white. They kind of tend to lean more towards the black and white medium. But then again, it probably varies every year anyway, so it just depends on what work is submitted for the competition. And they do seem to be quite conceptual, but they don't shy away from realism. Quite a lot of the artwork that was shortlisted for this year, and the finalists and everything, was quite realistic. So I guess they quite like realism, but with that conceptual idea behind it. I've applied to the Green and Stone Gallery, which is a gallery in Chelsea. It's quite small, but I think they are extending it a little bit, and they've got a framing gallery on the opposite side of the road, which also they use for the summer exhibition. But I really liked them because I applied for the first time last year. I'm going to apply again this year. But they just had such a range of work. So they had realistic, they had abstract, they had sculpture, they had loads of paintings, they had drawings, and they have like loads of different prizes as well, all suited for different mediums and different styles. So it kind of caters to everyone, I think. So that's probably a good competition, to be honest, to enter if you just want to see your work in like a professional space and you've not really applied to many competitions before or done many exhibitions. I think that's a good one to go to because there is such a variety of work and you're not kind of in competition with any other artists that are very, very similar to you, because everyone is so different. So I guess that kind of helps with the with the rejection if you don't get it, because you think, well, it's so subjective anyway. They might just have liked one thing more than another, and that's fine. Whereas when you apply to other competitions that are predominantly for wildlife artists, I think that's more of a kick in the teeth, because everyone's kind of doing similar things in terms of like the wildlife. So the Green and Stone Summer Exhibition is a really good one to apply for. I'm not actually sure when the deadline is. I'm sure it's mid-May. So yeah, I should probably have a look actually, because I was going to apply to that. There's another one called the Coloured Pencil Society, and obviously they absolutely adore coloured pencils. They don't accept any other mediums, and they love realism. Because like I said before, I do think coloured pencils and realism kind of go hand in hand, because to learn the basics and really advance with your skills in terms of your coloured pencils, it's all about layering and different techniques, and you do kind of end up going down that really detailed, realistic route. So that's kind of a good one to apply for as well. The Coloured Pencil Society, obviously if you do coloured pencils, if you don't then obviously not. The Explorers for Extinction Sketch for Survival competition, I applied for the first time last year, and their exhibition was in November in London, and that was such a good one to go to, because you can see your work, your wildlife work next to other wildlife artists, and you meet so many other people in your sort of niche, and it was supporting conservation as well. So it was just an overall really good competition to enter. And to be honest, it was mainly realistic, but they did have quite a lot of different and unusual mediums as well. Every artwork is framed, and I think you can only submit either an A4 size or an A3 size, and they frame it for you for the exhibition. So they don't accept sculptures or anything like that, I don't think. It's just got to be flat, like paper or like canvas paper sort of surfaces. But yeah, they did have a few, like I met an artist there who he was doing like geometric shapes, and from a distance it looked really realistic, but then when you actually looked at it, it was digital art, but when you actually looked at it, it was all connected with like different shapes, like he'd just broken everything down into shapes. I think it was very different to a lot of other people's, but it kind of stood out because of that. Yeah, it was really interesting actually. I got speaking to him, and he did like wire sculptures as well. So I don't necessarily think you have to stick to the same medium either. It's good to have a range of skills, I think, and know how to use quite a few different mediums. But yeah, that's the Explorers for Extinction Sketch for Survival competition. So, they love obviously wildlife artwork, they love conservation things, and both realistic, and probably more realistic than abstract stuff. And the main one, in my opinion, is the David Shepherd Wildlife Artist of the Year competition, which is absolutely huge for the wildlife art and artist sort of scene. I've applied 5 times and haven't yet been shortlisted. However, I applied, I think it was March, for this year's competition. So I hear back very soon. I hear back early May. So by the time this goes out, I might have heard back. So fingers crossed, because this is literally the 5th time I've applied, and I feel like if you get into that, the people that you'll meet and the artwork, like the quality of artwork you'll see in your niche of wildlife artwork is going to be crazy, isn't it? I just think it's such a good thing to throw yourself into. So yeah, fingers crossed for this year. But from the artworks that have been selected in the past, either shortlisted or the finalists or the people that have won the different categories or like the overall winners, I think each year it varies, and they do like a mixture of realistic and sculpture and paintings, drawings. Like they do love an entire range. I think they love the ones with like a bit of a concept behind them, a bit of an idea, or just something that kind of makes sense with the visual of your work. And one thing with that competition as well is that you can submit like a little paragraph or so kind of explaining the idea behind your work. So that in a way can help them understand it more, and could be the difference between you getting shortlisted and not shortlisted. So yeah, I think it depends what competition you're doing and what your artwork is and what you're kind of doing it for. If you're more of a process driven artist, or whether you're more of a ideas based artist, like everything goes really. It just depends what competition you apply for. And no matter what competition you apply for, you'll always be faced with rejection. Like the past sort of 5 years, I've really applied to so many competitions, like as many as I can, to try and get my name out there and meet other artists and galleries and everything like that. And it is a bit disheartening when you keep getting no after no after no, but then it makes when you get a yes so much more worth it. I remember when I got the email saying I'd been pre-selected for the Green and Stone Gallery last year, I was absolutely buzzing. And for that Coloured Pencil Society competition, I think it was about 2 years ago now, I did like a really long sheep piece, and that was, you know, I went to Smith Hill's farm like I was saying before, and I took the reference photos myself and I arranged them all, so it was my own complete original artwork, so it kind of makes it that bit more special really. And yeah, that's the one that got highly commended, and it also got the People's Choice Award, so I got 2 awards from that. And they sent me 2 certificates as well. So yeah, I remember the overall winner last year for the David Shepherd Wildlife Artist of the Year competition was super abstract, like really abstract. I'm sure she did it based on giraffes, but the more that you looked at it, the more you'd find like different shapes or little ones that she'd hidden within the painting. And to be honest, it was really quite interesting to look at once you knew the context. Without the context, you sort of look at it and think, well, what's going on there? How's that to do with wildlife? But the more you look at it, the more you think, oh yeah, that's a giraffe there and a bit of a giraffe there. That you could see different suggestions of the giraffe within that painting. So I guess it just depends on the year and what submissions they get. But competitions are always a good thing to kind of go for, really. But yeah, I've basically just given you a full list of competitions to apply for there. If you're a pet portrait and wildlife artist, they're kind of the main ones that I apply for every year, and I kind of keep adding to that every year as well. And they do take quite a long time to submit your work for these competitions as well. I think it's so important to have like an artist bio already written out that you can just use for each competition, but then at the same time you might want to adapt it slightly or adjust it to fit what that competition wants, or what that exhibition wants. But yeah, having that artist bio there definitely helps, so you're not like writing one out every single time. It would also be interesting to hear your experiences and, you know, what you think the general vibe is from these competitions and or exhibitions, if you've applied for them or exhibited with them in the past. Another thing that I probably should have mentioned before when I was on about the Manchester Art Fair and sort of walking around there, getting loads of inspiration, meeting other artists that are local to the sort of Manchester, Lancashire area, and seeing the kind of artwork and artists that galleries are representing. Sometimes when I've left there, I've felt really inspired, but also kind of questioned my own work a little bit, I think. Just thinking like, do I need to start painting again? Does it need to be a bit more commercial? It does make you question your artwork, I think, a little bit, but at the same time you still need to have that confidence in your work. I remember the first year I went on my own, and the last year I went with Conrad, my boyfriend. He did business and marketing at uni, so he helps me with so much of this stuff, but he came with me that time, and afterwards I was sort of speaking to him saying, you know, paintings sell for a lot more. If you make your art more commercial or you have a bit of a spin on the realism, it might attract different galleries and everything. But then you've got to think, well, what are you doing the artwork for? And he just always says, you know, have that confidence in your work. And I'm doing something right in terms of going down the teaching route, because it's something that I really enjoy. And I've sort of perfected and developed that style for so long, that I need to kind of have confidence in it and stick with it. But then at the same time, it's like, can you change your style after you've spent so long perfecting it? I think you can experiment with different things. Like, for example, I am currently planning my next workshop, and I'm actually considering doing a watercolour workshop, because my background is in painting. I did painting mainly at uni, and I kind of miss it sometimes because I do drawing so much. I miss the whole painting and being a little bit looser. And I think when I'm teaching a workshop that's going to be, you know, in front of a lot more people this time, which I'm quite scared about, but it'll be fine. I just considered using watercolours because it's kind of quicker to teach a bigger group. You can see them results a lot quicker. It's less costly for me in terms of the materials, and I wouldn't have to buy each and every person those individual pencils, which would cost an arm and a leg. So I'm thinking of doing watercolours. So I think it's good to kind of keep different mediums going and experiment with things. You don't have to stick to what you're good at. You can develop another skill in another medium, and you might do a collection of artwork in one medium and a collection of artwork in another. So you're not necessarily stuck with what you know. But I think for me, a lot of people know me for the realistic coloured pencil artwork. So when I'm teaching, that's what they come to learn. So in that aspect, I'm probably never going to change that. Like, I love the timely process and like the intricate details and everything of realistic colour pencil drawings. But at the same time, it's good to kind of mix it up a little bit and experiment once in a while. But yeah, so overall, I definitely say there's a divide between people who love and like respect realistic artwork and appreciate like the time and the effort and the process and the skill needed to create something like that. And then you have the people who just love the complete opposite and just love the abstract, contemporary, conceptual stuff. And that's okay. Art is super subjective and it just depends on your own tastes and what you like. But hopefully you've got an insight into my opinion on it all and my experience with it in terms of like uni and competitions. I've actually wanted to talk about this topic for quite a while because, I speak to quite a lot of artists who are like me, like pet portrait and wildlife artists, and they have a very similar opinion. So I think maybe in terms of if you're an artist, it depends on what your artwork looks like as well. Like if you're an abstract painter, then you're likely to like abstract work. You're not gonna love realistic wildlife. So I think it depends on what you specialise in and your style. But even if you're not an artist, there's honestly so many different factors that can kind of impact your opinion on realistic or conceptual art. But yeah, I thought I'd give you my sort of insight and opinion on it. So I hope you've enjoyed episode 3. I feel like I'm flying through these now, which is exciting. I'm really getting stuck in. So thank you for watching if you've watched on YouTube, and thank you for listening. And if you've made it till the end, thank you so much. I literally love reading all of your amazing feedback and comments from my podcast so far. Like, it's been honestly overwhelming. I honestly appreciate every single one of you who has listened or left a comment or messaged me saying how much they've taken from an episode, how much it's inspired them or whatever. And that's what the whole point of these podcasts is about. I just want to inspire you and serenade you with my soothing voice. It's so funny that people keep saying that. That's going to be like a running joke throughout the whole entire podcast. Might just burst into song on the next one, we'll see. But yeah, thank you so much for watching or listening, and I'll be back next week with a brand new episode.